if you're trying to talk.
Right, so we're live now and we're recording.
Okay, well, I'd like to call the meeting to order if we have the committee. So I see Karen is here and Safwat is here and staff is here and so are our consultants. Okay, so call the meeting to order. The Legislative Advocacy Committee on December 7th at 2 p.m. Anyway, we've noticed that we have the committee in place in attendance. So we'll go ahead to see if there are any public comments at all, Joelle?
Yes, so at this time, if you would like to make public comment on items not listed on today's agenda, please raise your hand. And Chair Riley, we do not have anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Joel. We'll go to the first item. Action item is considering the minutes of May 25th. I have a small comment on the minutes. The very first page, the very last line, at least of the copy I have, it reads, the line is wildlife prevention. I think it's protection. And I just want to have that noted.
Okay.
Anyway, the legislation we're talking about.
Yeah, the very second line. Yeah.
Yeah, so it just with that correction, I see I'm okay with the minutes. Does any committee member have a comment?
I don't, just that there are people who are in favor of wildlife prevention, but I'm not one of them.
Okay, well, let's again, Joel, ask if there's any comments from the public on the minutes section, and then we'll go to action.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 1, please raise your hand. And Chair Riley, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the committee.
Okay, well, I'd like to move approval of the minutes with that one word correction. Is there a second for adopting the minutes?
I second.
Okay, roll call, please, Joel.
Yes, Director Malik,
Yes.
Director Paul,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes, thank
The
you.
motion passes.
Thank you. So the next, all the other items are discussion. We'll still have public comment as we go along. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you for the sequence.
Yeah, so we're going to start with a report from JEA and Associates on state-oriented activities. I do want to let you know we're going to try to be done within an hour today, so let's not get too bogged down if we can avoid it. John and Lori, you want to introduce the year-end report and anything else you may have?
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you to the committee. This has been an incredible year. Unlike last year, things started to open up more and so forth. That includes the legislature, somewhat in person, but more so just getting back to some of the things that we were doing the year before, and still concerned with COVID. But trying to move along, and that's what this year was about. We had an incredible year when you consider, we were dealing with $100 billion surplus, and thanks for the economy picking up more than people anticipated, revenues to the state better than anticipated, and thanks to the funding that we were receiving here in California at the federal level. So there was a lot going on. The legislature was busy dealing with this huge chunk of money that they've never had to deal with before, and how best to put it to work for the state of California, for the workforce, for the issues that we were facing, like the wildfires that will continue because of climate change, the drought for the same reason, and dealing with a number of other immediate action items here in the state of California that were affecting the whole country. So, having said that, specific to the water district, we have been working closely with Aqua, and they have been trying to bring about more of those dollars to the water issues. And I think we began to see that. Lori will go into more detail on those particular items, but there has been a movement to start bringing about dollars to both climate resiliency, the water surplus or water, trying to build more of a plan for the state that would provide for these water issues for years to come. So, I think we're headed in that direction. We should be seeing a lot more of that this coming year, and working close with Dave Stolt and the legislature. Our delegation legislators will continue to address that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori to go into some more detail as far as the specific bills that we were tracking and some of the grant dollars that are starting to become available, and our work to do on that. So Lori. Let me see. Oh, she said she's trying to get back on. Okay.
Yeah, while we're waiting on Lori, I did want to highlight on, and what you'll hear when she talks a little bit more about climate resiliency and the water bond, is they rolled a lot of things into Senate Bill 129, and that will be the vehicle for establishing programs next year. So we'll follow that. But also, Mark Stone had Assembly Bill 315, which was signed by the governor. And this one caught me by surprise. I forgot about it. But it's when you do streambed restoration projects on private property owners, it provides indemnification. And so I'm going to look at that and see how that relates to a lot of the Carmel River work we do. As you know, we have to enter friendly private property owners' parcels from time to time. And I know this has been an issue. So if this helps in our cause, knowing that they've got some indemnification, that'll be useful. And then, of course, AB 361, that's the monthly renewal we do on Zoom meetings that Robert Rivas managed to push through and get signed by the governor. So those are two that we supported. Everything else that we supported, some of them minor, but the bigger ones all got rolled into the Senate bill. There she is. Hey, Lori.
Hi, Lo. Sorry, no, my internet's going crazy. They're doing construction around here. I apologize.
Well, we just set you up for a discussion about Senate Bill 129 and where that stands and what that will mean for us next year.
Well, it's hopefully going to mean a lot. So where it stands is that, as you know, that replaced the water bond bills, SB 45 and AB 1500. Just note that probably another water bond bill is coming, and it'll be wrapped up into another resiliency package. I'm sure John told you we're at about $31 billion and counting in surplus, and I'll get on some of the other climate stuff. So in that bill is $2.4 billion. It is broken down by multi-benefit, wastewater, groundwater, some Sigma, as I said, groundwater, some water recycling. So during the last couple months, we've been working with Dave on looking at all the grant funding and eligibility. So all of this money is going to be used in existing funding streams with DWR and the Water Resource Control Board. They just have to rewrite the eligibility. So that's kind of where we're going right now, is basically monitoring all these funding pools when we start applying for grant funding. And also in that breath, there will be more funding, as I said, coming out. Spoke to Laird staff that climate resiliency is going to be huge next year. It was big this year. It's going to be huge next year. And it's going to be tied into water and housing, which will, is a big issue for MPWMD. But with that, in speaking to Senator Laird's staff, he is one of the 12 senators that is basically this climate change group that is starting to look at the big ticket items like building energization, of, looking at home building climate efficiency, again, water recycling, all of these things. to put forth. So they're in the basic talking stages, with any climate stuff. The big hiccup, seems to be labor. So they're trying to like really iron out all these issues right now. But we'll have more to report to you guys within the next 2 months as we're having frequent meetings with his office. So again, many funding opportunities, and we've already identified about 5 to 6 of the funding plots. That includes infrastructure money and planning money at this time. So we'll be working on that, as well as monitoring all new legislation, carryover legislation, and budget items that we should know more about in exactly 1 month.
And just so the committee knows, we did do a letter of support for about $510 million to the IRWM program.
Yes.
And so all of these bills, the two that Lori mentioned, and IRWM funding, and then there was an attempt to do, maybe you call it the state's equivalent of earmarking, but Senator Laird's office asked us for a project list of things that we would be ready to go on for drought resilience. And we pitched the deep injection well number 4 for redundancy and building up a reserve. That effort ended up getting subsumed by this whole joint SB 129. And so we didn't get anything through Laird's office. And then the Department of Water Resources kind of circumvented their own IRWM funding plan by doing an immediate solicitation through what's called the FAST system, FAAST, which is an electronic filing system. And a number of water agencies did submit small project proposals through that. We did not. So we're now kind of waiting to see what gets promulgated for how this money gets distributed, and that we'll work with Lori and John on that. But there should be some opportunities there at the state level. I mean, it's not small change. I mean, 24 billion is a lot, but as you'll see when we get into the federal side, a lot of it doesn't really apply to us. So with that, sorry, Lori, go ahead.
Oh, no. And this is something, again, with earmarking, or we like to call them members' request. There is a high likelihood that we will be meeting with Laird's office again for that if there is an opportunity to do so. So those conversations we'll start having within the next 5 to 6 weeks.
I have a question, maybe to Dave, but do we ever seek grants as a partner with, say, Monterey One? Do we go jointly for some funds ever?
Yeah, kind of 2 different levels. One is as a joint applicant, and the other is just as a joint grant writer. So with the state revolving fund loan for Pure Water Monterey came 15 million of grant monies, which we supported in the application process, but we weren't on it because the loan belongs to the project. We have jointly applied for things at the federal level, but typically there's one project lead, but we've co-branded a number of things. So like even the WIN Act loans and the Bureau loan, Title 16, I'm sorry, not loan, grant, we were kind of hand in glove. And frankly, Roger, who's on today, and Chris, who's on today, trotted us around quite a bit to the relevant committees and staffers to kind of get that project known, which helped a lot, and frankly to the Department of Interior folks. So there's been a kind of a team whole court press. Going to change a little bit. Monterey One Water has their own federal team coming on board in January. And I think they also hired their own Sacramento team. I don't know if they're on board yet, but they'll probably come on board in January as well. But at the state level, because we are the coordinator for the IRWM, geographically distributed monies, we've often acted as the applicant on behalf of others where we're not really a co-recipient. but there'd be, you know, like the Marina Coast Water District, Ruat project, and the City of Monterey Stormwater project, things like that. So there's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, thank you for that. Back to the consultants, if there's more to go.
Yeah, one issue do want to talk about, and it's one that we've dealt with for a little over a year, and we see it kind of maybe crescendoing in 2022, and that's an issue of the condition 2 housing issue with the water. As you know, in previous reports, we, along with Dave, have been meeting with the Department of Housing and Community Development. He has had conversations with several staffers and consultants at the State Water Resource Control Board, as well as with Senator Laird multiple times. And again, having all these communications of trying to get some resolution. Where we are at as of date is that in a meeting that occurred not too long ago, we're going to be drafting a letter on behalf of Senator Laird, essentially inquiring of where we are with it. You know, there is.
Yeah, and we will let the senator request a workshop as a means to kind of circumvent ex parte rules with the State Water Board board members, and hopefully they'll take us up on it. You know, electronically, it's very easy to set it up. We have met with the local housing advocates, and even just today I saw an email come in from Monterey Bay Economic Partnership where they're working with, don't know who it is, honestly, but they suggested 4 individuals at the Housing and Community Development Office at the state, which is exactly what we encouraged them to do a few weeks ago, early November, that we're the water guys, but they're the housing guys, and you need somebody at a higher level in the housing and community development to be talking to the water folks at the State Water Board. So it looks like they've taken that bait and intend to do it. I can't recall if any of you were on the Water Demand Committee meeting, but I did update that committee last week on this. I was probably it was a little Debbie Downer because we've made no real good progress. The state knows the issues out there, State Water Board, and they haven't really acted. So this will be one last attempt to elevate it, get, you know, as I said, a workshop setting oriented. And we may draft our own version of an interpretive letter to come from the Deputy Director for Water Rights, who's basically their chief enforcement tool, that might interpret condition 2 the way we're asking them to. But, you know, we're heading into the Christmas holiday and they're slow to act even during normal months. So, you know, this is probably a January, February ask. Well, it'll be an earlier ask, but outcomes, you know, beginning of the year. So we'll see where that goes. But I am a little more optimistic than I was just a week or 2 ago, given that our local housing advocates are finally stepping up again on it. So.
Well, that's good. I'm a little surprised that John Laird doesn't see the simplicity involved in this, as opposed to something complicated in order to make progress. Yeah,
well, he does. And what's interesting is, yeah, let me just look at who's listening in. So there's one phone number and our chairman. So the city manager, City of Monterey, has been very active, as you can imagine, because they've got 4 city properties in the urban sector, and then they've done a lot on Garden Road, and they really want to see this thing go, you know, go. He was encouraging Kate Daniels to get the senator to go press for the question with the State Water Board. Joaquin Esquivel, who's the chair of the State Water Board, used to work for John Laird when John was Secretary of Natural Resources. So, you know, they have a collegial relationship, but as we've been advised by the attorneys, that's still ex parte communication, which is a no-no because we filed an actual application for this process. So I think what we're trying to do is set the senator and his staff set them up to be successful in reaching the state water board and clarify what you correctly say is a simple, straightforward issue. On the opposite side, we're over here looking at, again, that 30-month period of available water supply. And, you know, my opinion as to what we can and should do relative to that interim period varies with whether or not, like next Monday, Tuesday, we get 3 inches of rain, or if it skips us and goes to Santa Cruz. So, you know, we're still trying to measure where we really stand on a compliance level, even though, and we kind of mention this in every conversation, there's not going to be any housing built and finished and come online likely before we finish the Pure Water Monterey expansion. So it's one of these things where we're being held up by the theoretical, not the practical, meaning they look at the words and they say, well, this could mean that you might take more water, and therefore, if your supplies are already short, then you're imperiling the community. And in theory, that's true, but on the practical side, it's no, we're just trying to remove a barrier so a developer can make the commitment. If you, the state, say you will not, you know, you'll selectively not enforce for an increment of water related to affordable housing, then these projects can move forward, and they're not going to be done in time to even affect river diversions. So it's, you know, I think we got another good 6 months on it, and if we're making progress, then it'll still have some meaningfulness for the community. If we don't get traction by then we're just going to be, depending on where we're at with pure water expansion, we'll kind of be running out of time. So I'll leave it at that, except that early on in their discussion, Senator Laird and one of the state staffers talked about an assembly bill that he introduced back as an assembly member in 2003. And they thought maybe that would be a legislative fix. And so we finally reviewed that bill. And we were thinking that through Lori and John's practice that we could find a sponsor and introduce a bill. Well, it turns out it was way back when the Coastal Water Project was designed to just be a replacement supply for the unlawful diversions. And all the bill did was say, let's expand the project by, I think it was 750 acre feet solely for the purpose of housing. Completely different approach, because we now have projects coming that will have the water in it. What we're trying to do here is just, as I mentioned earlier, selective enforcement of words in condition 2. So I don't foresee a legislative fix based on that previous bill from way back when, but we might be able to come up with something. You know, we basically would have till, I think, what, John, Lori, till January to find a sponsor, and
third week in February.
Third week in February, yeah. So we're, you know, we'll look at that, but it has to be something different than AB 1330, which was the supposed model that never went forward.
Well, I guess my follow-up question to John and Lori perhaps is, is the state acknowledging that they have mutually competing priorities around water and housing, restrictions on water plus the promotion of housing?
They're not admitting it. They're both very, very, very important, but they're, you know, they kind of go silent in the calls that we've had with them. They do see that they are committing, but they don't know how to address it, that they are competing priorities. And each one thinks that they outrank the other. Water may start outranking, you know, as Dave said, if the rain doesn't come and the drought worsens, you know, this could just be a moot issue. So we will see who will have the loudest voice, but it's just, you know, we've been very good at keeping the issue in front of their faces on both ends, and even in the legislature, the housing committee, as well as the Senator Skinner's office, and they're the one that drafted SB 330 that kind of a little bit put us in this pickle. So, again, we're keeping the issue in front of them, and it who blinks first, where we're at.
And I know you guys understand this, but even when you can get a state staff member to say, yeah, we haven't been consistent in our enforcement, or yes, there's been selective enforcement, trying to get them to make a specific policy of selective enforcement and put that on paper just won't happen. And so we have to find a very artful way to have them issue something that has the effect of selective enforcement without it looking like it. So that's been part of the problem. And they've recognized that we've asked, that the issue exists, that there is knowledge of the need, but then the confession is just basically, we've had a lot to do and we haven't done it. So.
Mm-hmm. And if we try to do anything statewide that is not selective enforcement, it sets precedents, and they would be absolutely resistant to any statewide legislative effort and whatnot, but that's just to be expected. I mean, sometimes, there are many different reasons why we introduce bills, and one of them is just to put the conversation out there of I wouldn't say necessarily a threat, but it's to kind of force people to the table and to find an amenable solution before trying to move this thing forward. So, that's still on the table. But as Dave said, that these discussions will continue to happen, and hopefully we can get a clear answer with maybe Laird's gentle questioning of where the water board's at.
Great. Any other questions for JEA and Associates?
Oh, and just one more thing for the upcoming year, and we'll probably, depending on what does come down the pike with signatures, is that this is going to be a general election year, which means we're going to have more than a handful of initiatives coming up to vote. Some of these will indirectly affect the district. Some might directly affect the district. With that, with term limits, we'll probably see a third of the legislature turn over. We do not anticipate any power shift. However, we will definitely be seeing a new leadership in the assembly from the speaker side, as he has termed out. And just kind of, in little rumblings, our local assembly member Rivas is in the possible running to become Speaker of the Assembly. So we'll keep you kind of like the politics are going to shift a little bit, possibly to our favor. But then also it's those initiatives that we consider that can be very impactful and possibly dangerous in some scenarios.
Great.
That's it.
And
Yeah, that's terrific, and it's good to hear that Rivas is in the running.
Yeah. So Joelle, I don't know if you want to go out to the public on this item.
Yes.
So if you would like to make public comment on item number 2, please raise your hand. And Chair Riley, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the committee.
Okay, well, and if there are no more comments from the committee, we'll move to the next item, which is the Ferguson Group.
Yeah, so I'll introduce Roger Gwynn in a second. I hope you've seen in your packet that we had 2 exhibits on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which has been passed and is moving forward. And then there is an update on the Build Back Better plan that does have some water-related components to it. Last week, or a few weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, I think, we sat down with TFG and we talked a little bit about the pockets under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I think we've got a pretty good summary now that we'll touch on briefly here. And then that'll be part of my report to the full board on Monday, because I know there's been a lot of excitement about how much money is available. And I think when last asked, I said I'd be happy to come back and do an expectations management report. So with that, Roger, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dave. And just to we're going to give you a brief overview on sort of generally what's happening here in Washington on the debt ceiling, outlook on reconciliation, the infrastructure package that Dave mentioned, FY22 appropriations, and again, touching on one of the items that documents you have before you, which is the legislative tracker. Just to start with on the debt ceiling, this is the latest news today, is that there has been a deal reached on the debt ceiling effort to raise the debt ceiling. The Republicans and Democrats in Congress have agreed on a plan to break what has really been a long-standing partisan impasse over this. As you may know, Congress needed to raise the debt ceiling, according to Treasury Secretary Yellen, by December 15th. This deal will raise the debt ceiling by about $2 trillion. That'll cover government spending through the midterm elections through December of next year. The maneuver they're undertaking right now is a little, a little bit odd, but in any case, they're using a little, political gimmickry or legislative gimmickry to move forward here. The bill basically that's going to come before the House this week would to do this, we'll need 10 Republican votes in the Senate to advance advance in the process and to basically provide an extension of the debt ceiling. And what they're going to do is pass two different bills basically to set up this, to allow this to happen. One that will allow the Republicans to vote for it, that will set up procedurally an opportunity for the Democrats alone to pass the debt ceiling extension. And so, and the House, again, is taking initial action on this this first step in this complicated, process to extend the debt ceiling, taking the first step on that this evening. In general, we think this is noteworthy just because from even to the district, just because it indicates that we think that there is an opportunity for some progress in other fronts. I think it's certainly a good sign that, again, the two Senate leaders, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, have been able to reach this agreement. And again, we think it's a good sign for appropriations, which we'll talk about in a minute, as well as the reconciliation package. And I'll turn to Chris Kearney to briefly give you an update on that important piece of legislation.
Thanks, and good afternoon. Thanks, Roger, and good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about our infrastructure. That's generally been considered the sort of hard infrastructure side or component of the president's Build Back Better agenda. The reconciliation or budget bill is really the sort of social side of that. It's got everything from matters related to potentially to immigration and on healthcare to tax deduction and tax incentives for renewable energy. But again, it also paves the way for some significant spending and frees up some opportunities for other programs that are important across the government into California and beyond. So that has been mired in a lot of politics, largely because, as you probably heard, Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema from Arizona, two key votes in a Senate that needs 50 votes to pass, have had a myriad of concerns that have hung the bill up for months. Most of them have focused around spending. They're coming down to the wire now. I think those two are in very aggressive negotiations. I talked to Senator Manchin's staff this afternoon, and he is working closely with the Senate leadership. There is a very strong effort to try to get that bill past the Senate by the week of Christmas. There is some skepticism in Washington that can get done or cannot get done, and then there are many quarters that think it can. I think at the end of the day that they're going to get there. But what the important thing is, once the Senate passes that, the House still has to pass it. So the likelihood is, if they can get it passed, they'll get it done the week between run up to Christmas. Then they'll break and come back in January. That'll give them time for the House and Senate to hash out the last of their differences. It is possible, just because it's Washington in this bill, that some of the last minute issues that continue to hang out there may keep it even from passing the Senate, and they may be due the last week of December or maybe even in January. So we are not there yet, but the likelihood of passage is closer than it's been, and leadership, Senator Schumer made it clear in a letter to his members just yesterday that he was going to do everything in his power to get the bill done. So if that gets done, that'll be a major accomplishment, and that'll get a significant number of the elements of the president's agenda accomplished. But there's still a bit more work to do. But in the meantime, the infrastructure bill itself, which has been enacted and has a number of pieces of benefit that we've lined them out in that report, that I'll turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the programs of direct benefit to the district.
Thanks, Chris, and nice to be with all of you today. I'll just point out a couple things that are in that report that may be of interest to you folks. First of all, the Water Smart Grant Program, which is typically a 50-50 cost share grant program for water conservation, water management, other types of projects, got an additional $400 million. That's significant. It's about double their current level of funding for over basically each year over a 5-year period, and 100 million of that 400 is to be made available for natural features or nature-based features that conserve or manage water and watershed more effectively and more efficiently. And those features could obtain between a 50 and a 75% cost share grant, depending on the type of feature it is. The other aspect, there's a watershed management projects, $100 million for that, for basically diverse stakeholder groups that are working in a watershed. That could be 50 to 100% share, depending on what it is. There's $250 million for aquatic ecosystem restoration grants. That's a new authority, and it'd be a new program that needs to be stood up by reclamation, but it could fund up to 65% of design, study, construction of aquatic ecosystem restoration protection, including fish passage. There's also the multi-benefit approach, project approach that got $100 million to improve watershed.
Mark is frozen, I think.
Yeah, you froze, Mark.
Yeah.
This is why we need infrastructure investment.
That's right. Broadband is part of this. Right.
Exactly.
Well, he'll come back. One of the things too that we'll say, well, until hopefully he does return, is that in fish passage, I think he was going to go down, highlight that again. That's an area where there are additional resources available, and certainly we're expecting some additional resources. There are some additional resources too that could be helpful through Fish and Wildlife Service. They've got a new program that's or a program that's existing program, but they're adding $200 million to that. Department of Transportation actually has a new program, which we've talked to Dave about, that will deal with smaller fish passage issues, to deal with culverts and things of that sort, removal of those obstacles, which may be of interest to the district. So we'll be exploring, a lot of those opportunities in the coming weeks, and let's see if Mark just joined back in. I guess he hasn't, but the Reclamation is holding some sessions on that starting this coming Friday that we will be tracking and reporting to the district on as well, where they'll be highlighting, the different programs, funding opportunities that'll be coming on board here through the infrastructure package.
Yeah.
And Mark, yeah, go ahead. Mark, go ahead.
I don't know what happened to that, but
I think we covered
fell
it.
on my head or something.
Yeah, we just talked about,
Anyway, go ahead.
we talked about watershed restoration.
Okay.
So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, just really one quickly, just turn to Rebecca Bliss. Could you tell you quickly about FY22 appropriation status and looking ahead to just the Ledge Tracker, just touch on that briefly. Rebecca?
So last week on December 3rd, President Biden signed into law a continuing resolution to avert the government shutdown and extend funding through February 18, 2022. The current resolution doesn't make any changes to FY21 funding levels for current energy and natural resources programs, including Title 16. But Congress is now working to compromise on an omnibus bill that would include all 12 appropriations bills for FY22, as none of the bills currently have been signed into law. The House has passed most of its bills, but the Senate has not passed any of them yet. So there's a lot of work to do still on FY22 appropriations. And this also goes back to the budget reconciliation bill, because if the reconciliation bill is not wrapped up by Christmas or the end of the new year, it will push 22 appropriations into January and February. So any progress towards reconciliation will move the current appropriations process forward. And I also just want to note that in the coming weeks, we'll be working with the district on their project priorities for FY23 appropriations after 22 appropriations get finished this spring.
And maybe just one final comment, Dave, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to point out, Dave mentioned that the new advocate, federal advocate that Monterey One Water has hired, and we're certainly very familiar with them, Carpy Clay. It's a very good firm, and certainly when when there's alignment between your interests and Monterey One Water's interests, there'll be certainly a great opportunity for a team effort on your behalf. Absolutely.
Yeah, and while we still have you, I wanted to touch on a couple other things, just so this group knows what we'll talk about on Monday. So in your packet was this, which was a summary of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that Ferguson Group did first in August and updated on the 10th. And then the 3B attachment was a little more elaboration that they published on the 12th. But in the first document on its page 28, or the fourth page of the attachment, there's a summary of the Western water infrastructure. And this is a big byproduct of why so many water agencies out here said, oh, there's gonna be a ton of money. A lot of it's gonna flow to California through the Western water infrastructure. And then there's several other titles. That's Title IX, but there's Title I, which is drinking water, and Title II, which is clean water. And I will be summarizing just why we don't qualify. And I'm just going to give you a couple examples. If you can look at that page, it says Title IX, Western Water Infrastructure, and Attachment 3A. 3.2 billion for aging infrastructure account. Well, these are only projects that had a critical failure within the last 2 years, or are what are called Carry Act projects. And so we don't qualify. We're not in that category of any Bureau of Reclamation projects. You go down a little bit further, 250 million for desalination. Now, I know the desalination project here is kind of on life support, but even if it did, the qualification for that is projects and studies that have already been authorized in the Water Desalination Act of 1996 that are authorized and approved before July 1 of 2021, or selected for funding under the 1996 Act. And so this is the game we're playing, where you're down further, 400 million for WaterSmart. Well, that's one that Mark already mentioned, and that is good. And we've applied and received money through WaterSmart before, so it's a competitive process, but we will qualify for that. But in this list under Western Water Infrastructure, it's a not really, because we're capped out on projects that have been funded by the WIN Act. And then it's no, 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 maybe, yes, probably not, no, and no. And so that's what I think our board needs to better understand, that you take 8.3 billion, and at the end of the day, there's a few hundred million, mostly competitive, that we'll be competing for. But that being said, it's already been mentioned, but there is this aquatic ecosystem restoration, 250 million. And part of it in there is improved fish passage via the removal or bypass of barriers with limitations. So all the work we're doing in the Los Padres long-term alternative study has a component about bypass. If the dam remains in place, we need to, the current proposals are improve the trap and truck upstream project, and then possibly build a new behavioral guidance system for the downstream project. So there's something new that we've not seen before, where there may be some money. And then the other one that Mark alluded to is in Fish and Wildlife Restoration, 200 million for restoring fish and wildlife passage by removing in-stream barriers and providing technical assistance. Well, you know, we got closed out on the Hastings Reserve ford removal project. You know, we did that $100 million grant to the University of California for planning. But when we applied for money for the project, we got closed out, but there are still about 7 identified barriers in the tributaries and the river itself. So these are some things I've asked Thomas, as you know, our environmental division manager, to start looking at these things. And these could be little pieces where I think, Roger, you said, you know, if it's $1.5 million or a couple million, it could even be an earmark, possibly under the community funded projects or whatever. So
Correct.
I think that's a little bit of where our attention is going to go. On the bigger stuff, we're going to remain joint with Monterey One Water on the pure water expansion. A bunch of money went into both the clean drinking water state revolving fund as well as the safe drinking water. So there's one that's the clean water component is usually wastewater, and the drinking water component is obviously potable drinking water. So those push monies into the funds that we try to access, but it's through an application to the state and so forth. So we'll just be doing that through normal channels. But I think we owe it to the board to kind of walk through how we don't qualify for vast sums of this money, just so people know. Now, that being said, the Build Back Better Act, I did want to let you know, actually going back to the other one, we did meet Monterey One Water, myself. We didn't have, sorry guys, we just didn't think of it, to have Ferguson Group on. Our call with Ernest Conant, who's the director of the Bureau's Mid-Pacific region, and then his staff. We did that last week. And there was some discussion about whether they've got administrative authority to raise the cap. So that there's a cap on funded projects at $20 million a piece. And so our first phase of Pure Water Monterey went in under that cap. And we're at 19.6 plus change. So under the existing cap, we only have another $300,000 available. And so as we brought Pure Water Monterey expansion online, our first train of thought was, let's amend the original feasibility study and put the two together, because of the qualifying criteria of the base project is so much better than Pure Water Monterey on a standalone project. So we thought that might help us, but because we're almost at the cap, it wouldn't get us more new money, but it would allow greater flexibility to take the 19.6 or 7 that we've been appropriated and authorized to move it from the base project to the expansion project. So that's one thing we're considering. If the cap could be raised, then we might split those two apart and submit a separate feasibility study for the expansion. So that would start a new $20 million project if the cap isn't raised. And if the cap is raised, then we might want to leave it in the amended basis. But the problem I see, and actually Roger and Chris, I just heard this today, maybe you can tell me if it's true, but originally the idea of raising the cap legislatively was led somewhat by Dianne Feinstein's office. And we're being told now that they're no longer really pushing that or leading that charge, which means that you may or may not see it in some legislation for a while. And then we pitched the idea that it actually seems to say in the legislation that the cap can be raised based on CPI every year administratively. And Ernest assigned one of his deputies to go look at that and take a look at it. You know, Paul Schutter is convinced that it's there plain as day, but it's not something that has been done frequently administratively. So we're not optimistic that they would choose on their own to raise the cap based on the number of years of when the legislation was passed and CPI for each of those years. So I think we're kind of stuck on Pure Water Monterey with this choice of keeping the two feasibility studies together and moving that 19 million that we've gotten around, rather than breaking them apart and trying for a new 20 million on the expansion. Or we may try to do both, because the what we have to submit for the state revolving fund can be the amended feasibility study stamped, but what we submit to the Bureau can be whatever they direct us to do. And so what is submitted currently, even though we've submitted an amended plan, they've gone out of their way to say, you may not want to have us push this one through and make it final. You may want to think about splitting them. So we still have that luxury right now. It won't last on into the spring, but we have to get an application in for WIFIA, which is the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act loan program. And it costs us $100,000 to do so. That's the application fee. So that's due by the end of December. And we have to get the state revolving fund application in. So we're working on both of those things. You do see some money in this for WIFIA, but it's not much, like another 21 million and so forth. And that program is becoming a little more popular. But the other thing I wanted to say on the Build Back Better Act is we did sign a letter put out by the Alliance for Water Efficiency, which is a federal lobbying firm and think tank on water efficiency standards based out of DC. And we added our name to a letter because they've slipped into the Build Back Better Act the relief from federal taxation of rebates on water. And, you know, we've been kind of pushing that little tiny issue for quite some time, but we've had to, you know, W9 a bunch of folks for their very small, you know, $600 rebates. But think of the rebate that you just saw during administrative committee, $17,000 rebate. Well, that's still subject to federal reporting, and either they have to pay taxes on it or we have to withhold taxes on it. So it would be great if even that one small little piece gets through. You know, the electric utility industry's had no taxation on rebates since I think the 90s. So we're just, you know, late to the party. So we're holding on for that one, you know, just give us the tax break. So it's something that you should know that we did sign on to, and we'll see where that goes. And I think that brings us to a conclusion.
I had one question, Dave. I'm still under the impression that the federal infrastructure bills did not recognize special districts in California. And I didn't know whether that's still a kind of a parking lot idea where we're going to deal with that later, or is that a real issue that we're kind of, it's a stumbling block for us?
Yeah, I'll let Roger weigh in, but my understanding is no, these are typical programs for which we do qualify. Where we didn't qualify were the relief bills for COVID. And you know, even though John Garamendi made a big pitch to try to get special districts included, all of that money, which did include infrastructure money and include ratepayer relief money, either went down through the cities, the state Department of Water Resources, or to the counties. And so, you know, we were lining up cup in hand to ask for anything from the county. And you can imagine how that went over in 58 counties in California. We're not aware of any special district that received any of that infrastructure money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's right, Dave. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you know, the progress that was made in the COVID legislation was just largely to make explicitly special districts eligible recipients, sub-recipients, you know, of the funding, so that they could be passed down from the state or the county. I mean, and specifically eligible for that, for those funds, those general COVID relief funds. And the programs, as Dave said, the programs that we're really focused on here in the infrastructure package are ones that you're eligible for under existing law, and there was no need for any special legislation to allow that, you know, to allow you to be eligible to compete for those funds.
Yeah, it'd be easier to qualify if we were actually part of CalFed. You know, if we actually had a bureau component for a lot of these, but you know, they're putting a lot of money into Water Smart. They're revitalizing state revolving funds, so there are places that we will be affected.
Does the committee have any questions, comments at this point?
Just to say that I appreciate your searching and hunting and trying to see if there's anything that we qualify for. Sounds like a little bit like searching for a needle in a haystack right now, but thank you for searching thoroughly. And Dave, yeah, I agree. It's a good idea to tell the whole board, you know, there's only a very few things that we might qualify for.
Thanks. Yeah.
One thing, Dave, this is Mark. One thing about going back to the cap. I don't think, I think Senator Feinstein is going to continue to push that legislation, but it's just not going to happen until next year. But I think that's very much alive in a water bill that could be put together in the first 3 months of next year, and probably not get passed until the end of the year in the lame duck session. You know how that goes. But,
Yeah.
I think that's still a live issue that we'll still work on.
Yeah. We should probably,
We'll report on that to you.
Yeah, we should come back together, because I think, you know, we're going to have to game our thing sooner than that. And so if we think it's imminent, it might be worthwhile to split our feasibility studies. And if we don't, you know, there are the two other benefits of keeping them combined, you know, moving that 19 million around, as well as using the criteria for the base project to qualify. So yeah, let's just stay on it. But that's good to know. I appreciate you weighing in with that, Mark.
Have we received, I'm sorry, Rebecca, just want to know if we've received that 19 billion, or are we still waiting for it?
We're still waiting for it. The first piece, I'm told, is imminent, and I can't remember exactly what they've requested, but they meaning our brethren at Monterey One Water, need it. They also know that we have requested to receive a piece of it somehow. Now that we're doing the expansion, I would have less of a problem, you know, not receiving direct reimbursement and putting it towards the project, just as long as it gets spent partially on real expenditures rather than just replenishing expended reserves and things like that. Unless part of that's us, then I'll take the money to replenish.
I think Safwat had a comment or question. You're muted, Safwat.
And Rebecca, I interrupted.
This is such a very important discussion, but I'm also mindful of David Stoltz's request to conclude this meeting within an hour. So we're coming up to that.
Yeah, I think we're there too, unless anybody has a particular item they want to place on a future agenda, or if there's public comment.
Did Rebecca have something to add? But I have nothing new to add anything.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to quickly mention that our updated legislative tracker included in the agenda. There has been a bill recently introduced that's not included on it by Representative Josh Harder, which would increase the funding for water smart programs from 50 million to 500 million.
Oh, good.
Wow.
Okay,
Thank you.
quickly, round robin on the committee for any new topics for future agenda items. Karen?
Not right now, sorry.
Yeah, I'll call on myself, and I have nothing to add. Safwat, do you?
No.
Dave, unless you have anything more to add, we're near the end.
Excellent. No, I'm all good. We got a lot to do. Dave Laredo, did you want to wait till 3:30, or you want to call me on?
I'll call you right now.
Okay.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you
Everybody.
Thank you.
on the East Coast.
Everybody.
very much.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.
Appreciate the East Coasters. All right.